Hello, I'm Tom Turner, and I'm going to read a shortened version of the text of a whistleblowing disclosure made to the Landscape Institute in October 2022. The signatories included senior practitioners, former trustees, former presidents, LI Gold medalists, former council members, authors and teachers. Since they share a deep concern for the welfare of the Landscape Institute, I've used a YouTube video about this, made in 2020, as background imagery. I'll also read some quotations from the responses given by the Landscape Institute in November 2022. We would have included the Institute's full response had it not been marked private and confidential. 6 of the responses begin with the phrase, "The LI is aware of the actual position," which means the points were accepted as disclosures, with 2 other points rejected as being not disclosures. The LI gave no responses to the whistleblower's evidence of inconsistencies between the LI's obligations and its actions, nor did the LI make any response to the recommendations for good practice. Those who made the disclosure were, for reasons which will become obvious, disappointed by the responses from the Institute. Please consider our disclosures, and if you believe the issues should be discussed at a general meeting of the Institute, which the board doesn't want to have, please send an email to limembersforlandscape@gmail.com. The 4 is the numeral 4. Also, please vote against receiving and accepting the accounts at the annual general meeting in December. Well, here's the text of the whistleblowing disclosure made in October 2022, with short quotations from the Institute's responses. It was sent to the Landscape Institute's CEO. Dear Sue Morgan, we make this whistleblowing disclosure on account of our love for the landscape profession and for our professional institute. Deeply concerned that the Landscape Institute has lost its way, we have itemized our concerns and we request explanatory responses, very much hoping that the issues can be righted. Matters were brought to a head by the adoption and immediate application of Regulation 21.5 in June 2022. Their progression to this point has been slow and troubling, with diminishing attention paid to the interests, wishes and concerns of members. Our 1930s Constitution, Clause 2, stated that the Institute shall be formed to promote the study and general advancement of the art of landscape architecture in all its branches, and to serve as a medium of friendly intercourse between the members and others practicing or interested in the art. As exemplified by the following points, these purposes no longer appear to be the objects of the Institute. Our points are subclassified as A. The obligation which rests on the LI, B. The indications of non-compliance, C. Our questions, recommendations and requests for explanations. Point 1. A. The LI's obligation. Members of the Institute's board are under an obligation to meet high standards of behaviour. B. Indications of non-compliance. The current Vice President has written that the whistleblowing inquiry into Brodie McAllister was conducted by the Advisory Council with no involvement of the board or employed officers. This statement is untrue and appears to be wrongdoing. The LI stated that the purpose of the committee is to investigate concerns regarding the conduct of Brodie McAllister arising from a report from the trustees dated 30th of March 2022 and make a recommendation as to whether the Council should remove Brodie McAllister as a trustee. C. Requests and recommendations. An explanation of the inconsistency is requested. It would clear the air if the text of the original whistleblowing disclosure were made available and if the whistleblowers revealed their identities, if there's more than one of them. Members believe they were trustees. The signatories to this disclosure are proud of their long support for the LI and, believing in transparency, are happy for their names and the text of their disclosure to be released and/or to be published on social media, including LI Connect. LI responds. The LI is aware of the actual position. The board referred concerns to the Council, who directed an investigation appointing a committee. Point 2. A. The LI's obligation. Caring and nurturing is a declared value of the LI. B. Indications of non-compliance. When the board, the advisory council and the CEO approved heavy expenditure on legal expenses to try and remove President Elect Brodie McAllister, the board refused him legal support in defence of his actions and his reputation. This was heartless to the degree of improper conduct. Furthermore, due process was not followed in conducting the investigation. C. Requests and recommendations. An explanation of the inconsistency is requested. Should the LI choose to instigate a thorough investigation of our disclosures, we would be happy for the matter to be dealt with by arbitration or by an independent inquiry, so that both parties receive equitable treatment. LI responds. The LI is aware of the actual position. The decision not to fund Brodie McAllister's legal advice or representation was one for the LI's board to make. Point 3. A. The LI's obligation. The LI has stated that we need the Institute to be open and accessible to all members at all levels. B. Indications of non-compliance. In response to an email from the present whistleblowers, the Governance and Regulation team refused to provide access to members' details and email addresses for the purpose of calling an EGM. This appears to be unlawful and conflicts with an advisory note by the LI's solicitors, Russell Cook, that, clearly, where members wish to call a general meeting and need the names and addresses of members in order to do so, this would constitute a proper purpose, and the charity should not restrict access to the register. Failure to provide a copy, except in the case of a successful court application as above, can lead to a fine for the charity and its officers. C. Requests and recommendations. An explanation of the inconsistency is requested, and we recommend that members are given opt-in, opt-out rights for making their email addresses available to fellow members. Branch chairs should also have the email addresses of branch members who opt for their availability. This would facilitate the friendly intercourse our founders envisaged. LI responds. The LI is aware of the actual position. The LI is not, however, prepared to release personal data which is not provided for in its data privacy statement to facilitate communications which may be expected to disparage the LI and be unwelcome to many members. Point 4. A. The LI's obligation. Trustees should use Landscape Institute resources responsibly and should adopt a caring and nurturing approach to members and staff. B. Indications of non-compliance. The former president of the LI, Jane Finlay, declined to release information about the expected legal expenditure on attempting to remove President Elect Brodie McAllister. But from the time it took and the hundreds of pages of text, it appears to have been a six-figure sum. Further, it was used to prepare a case against the accused. The investigation could have been done more equitably and more economically by using an arbitrator. The expenditure on legal services has severely diminished the funds available for developing policies to conserve and improve the environment. This is against the public interest. We are aware that trustees consider the accusations against the President-elect to be serious, but it has to be considered in the light of 7 past presidents' judgment that they were not significant. C. Requests and recommendations. An explanation of the inequity and of the misallocation of resources is requested. 1. We request a full disclosure of the expenditure on legal and other professional services in relation to the removal of the President-elect. 2. If any future issues of this nature arise, our recommendation is that proceedings commence with a roundtable discussion, that arbitration is the next alternative to consider, and that expenditure on lawyers is regarded as a last resort for use only in desperate circumstances. 3. We consider it bad practice that the advisory council which took the fatal decision was dominated by branch representatives who were forbidden to discuss the issue with the chairs of the branches or with the branch members they represent. LI responds. The LI is aware of the actual position. Whistleblowing disclosures are mechanisms by which people provide information, not where they demand it. Point 5. A. The LI's obligation. Trustees have a duty to act in the best interests of the Landscape Institute as a whole, to be fair-minded and not to act as a representative of any group or individual. B. Indications of non-compliance. The scope of the investigation of the President-elect carried out by the LI's solicitors went far beyond anything that can reasonably be supposed to have been mentioned in the text of the whistleblowing disclosure. It has been likened to a witch hunt and can be seen as improper conduct. C. Requests and recommendations. Explanations of this approach and of the solicitor's extensive trawling operation are requested. Was its scope set out in the instructions given to the solicitors? Our belief is that the Advisory Council should have drawn up the instructions and that it should be made up of elected branch chairs instead of by appointed reps. LI responds. The LI is aware of the actual position. This does not appear to be the disclosure of information at all. Point 6. A. The LI's obligation. Clause 1.1 of the Code of Conduct requires trustees to act within the governing documents of the Landscape Institute and the law, and to abide by the policies and procedures of the organisation. This includes having a knowledge of the contents of the Royal Charter, the bylaws, and the regulations. B. Indications of non-compliance. Landscape Institute Regulation 21.5 was published on the same day, 28th June 2022, that members were informed that the President-elect had been removed. The regulation was retrospective because, prior to 28th June, neither the Board of Trustees nor the Advisory Council had powers to remove a president chosen by the membership. Retrospective regulation, even if it is conceived as a clarification for the avoidance of doubt, is universally regarded as bad practice and is inconsistent with good governance. C. Requests and recommendations. An explanation of the inconsistency is requested. Our recommendation is that in order to retain the trust of members and of the public, the Landscape Institute resolves not to engage in retrospective regulation. LI response. The LI is aware of the actual position. The position of a president who is no longer a member of either the board or the council would be self-evidently untenable. Point 7. A. The LI's obligation. Clause 1.1 of the Code of Conduct makes specific reference to the Royal Charter. B. Indications of non-compliance. Regulation 21.5 is repugnant to clauses 11 and 17 of the Royal Charter. Clause 11 states that the Landscape Institute shall have a president. It does not state that the Landscape Institute will have a president at some future date. It uses the word shall in the specific legal sense of mandatory. This admits of no exceptions. Leaving the Institute for even a day is an unlawful breach of the Royal Charter. C. Requests and recommendations. An explanation of the inconsistency is requested. Our recommendations are: 1. The Institute is punctilious in following the provisions of the Royal Charter. 2. The stipulation that a president can only serve one term should be extended to the office of a vice president. 3. Candidates who stand for president or vice president should be asked to declare any conflicts of interest on other issues, including court judgments, which could stand in the way of their holding senior positions in the Institute. 4. Trustees should be reminded that they can hold office only for 2 terms and that further extensions will not be allowed. 5. The membership should be consulted about whether the voting rights of independent trustees should be retained. 6. Voting should be by directly elected trustees. LI response. This is not a disclosure, but the assertion of the signatory's own views. The LI does not agree. Point 8. A. The LI's obligation. Clause 2.2 of the Code of Conduct requires trustees to act in the best interests of the Landscape Institute as a whole and not as a representative of any group, and to avoid bringing the Institute into disrepute. B. Indications of non-compliance. When information about the secretive investigation of the President-elect began to leak, presumably from members of the Advisory Council, 6 past presidents of LI advised that the attempted removal of the President-elect would probably bring the Institute into public disrepute. This is exactly what is now happening, and part of the explanation appears to be that the Board of Trustees for at least 10 years has been neglecting the concerns of those who, like the signatories to this disclosure, wish to see the Institute take forward the beliefs of its founders, as identified in the preamble to this document. Trustees are entitled to take a different view, but they have a duty under the Code of Conduct to treat the views of all individuals and groups with courtesy and respect. This is particularly so when the group in question is calling for the Institute to devote a high proportion of its income to public goods. C. Requests and recommendations. An explanation of the inconsistency is requested. Our recommendations are: 1. Trustees refer to the Wikipedia entry on the Landscape Institute for further information about previous suggestions for taking the Institute forward in line with its founders' wishes. 2. Trustees extend the LI's commitment to inclusivity to include dissident groups within the membership. 3. Trustees continue to implement the recommendations of the 2020 Independent Review and include in its annual reports updates on progress, problems and fresh issues. 4. Trustees reincarnate its one-time practice of providing an analysis of resource allocations in its annual reports. Our belief is that a majority of members would like to see a growing proportion of the Institute's resources devoted to expanding the membership and promoting the many areas of work through which members can serve the public goods which lie at the heart of the Landscape Institute's mission. 5. Extreme caution should be exercised before allocating further resources to proceedings against members. 6. The work of the Institute should be based on the values of being caring and nurturing, creative and passionate, and socially and environmentally aware. LI responds: the LI does not intend to carry out any further investigation in relation to these matters for the reasons set out above. So there we have it. If you agree that these issues should be discussed at a general meeting of the Institute, which the board doesn't want to have, please email us at limembersforlandscape@gmail.com, with the 4 in the address being the numeral 4.